and welcome to another fun-filled episode of that 4K podcast. Ary Rosenbaum here, um, talking about, done a couple episodes already about this, but this is one about the TPA payroll provider articles. Obviously we've discussed it before, but this is the 10th anniversary of writing these articles, and we'll talk, obviously, my opinion, which has been consistent over the past decade, concerning TPA payroll provider. Well, payroll providers serving as TPAs, and why it's a bad idea. But of course, first things first, that 4K virtual conference 3, the search for Spock, that will be on Friday, June the 5th. Great Zoom webinar. We have, a lot of plan providers signed up. We'll talk about CPA audits of 401k plans, a lot of new material, a lot of new providers presenting. So it's a great event. Almost 100 people have signed up so far. We have over a week to go before it. So please feel free to sign up. Go to LinkedIn, go to Twitter, find the link, sign up. Great 4-hour event, lots of fun, lots of great information for everybody. And of course, with our in live events, we're still waiting on word on whether we're going to have a Major League Baseball season. Obviously, that will dictate what happens to rescheduling. I think every day that passes by, it looks more and more likely that a 2020 season will not happen. I hope that that's not the case. But regardless, it's looking, even if a season does start, it looks more likely 2021 for our events in St. Louis, Houston, Minnesota. We still have a Las Vegas event on tap for December. The way things are going, that will probably be the only event left for 2020. We'll see how it goes, obviously, with what's going on. It's obviously, this pandemic is a very, very fluid, situation. Disney World, where we had that 401k National Conference, it's been closed since March. We left town and they decided to close up after the outbreak of the coronavirus. They may be reopening up sometime, I think, July 11th, July 13th, and the other parks aren't opening. So obviously, even if there is a baseball season, it's very unlikely that fans will be allowed to go to games. And if that happens, obviously that affects our plans. And again, we'll see what's going on. Obviously, there are more important things out there. Our health, the economy, our businesses, all that kind of stuff. So, regardless, we will rise again and we will have events, hopefully, sooner than later. But, my grandmother was always the one person to say, you know what, you got to worry what you can control, and you can't worry what's not in your control, and life doesn't go to plan. It is what it is. I would have booked, events, and I was looking at Seattle in September, and Charlotte, and maybe Phoenix, and unfortunately, we got a nice curveball called COVID-19, and we're just at the mercy of not only this virus, but of course, obviously government dictating what we can and cannot do, obviously, to protect us. But anyway, this week's episode is about TPA, payroll providers as 401k TPAs, and the history of the articles. As you know, ad nauseum, 10 years ago, I started my own practice, started in April 2010. Things weren't going very well at the start, as with any new business. The problem was I made some, choices that I probably could rethink and redo. I hired a PR guy who actually, it's a very funny situation. It was did a lot of, when I was at Myers Swazi as an associate attorney, I did a lot of networking. And if you read my books, you'll know that I had a great marketing department in Myers Swazi. The problem was that there was a bottleneck. They only had like 3 or 4 people in that department. You had 50 attorneys, a lot of partners, a lot of bureaucracy, and we had Fred Esposito, who was the law firm administrator, who for some reason or another decided that he should crank out articles of his own based on law administration, which I found problematic because the law firm was not in the business of law firm administration, and he wasn't bringing any business. But the marketing department, he was a rat to the managing attorney, so they obviously decided to play ball and print his articles. So I really hadn't any access to writing articles and getting in front of newspaper writers and whatnot. So I, as an associate attorney, went on my own and hired my own PR guy. I didn't tell the law firm this, and people from the firm are listening now. It's probably the first time I ever heard it, but I hired a PR guy. Lovely guy. The problem with that lovely guy was he didn't bring me any business. Well, not that it was his job, but I actually brought him more clients than he ever brought me. The problem with him is he was an old school guy, as they say. Very, very old school. So old school that honestly he didn't really, understand what I did. And I think that's a problem. I remember he was trying to have me network with another one of his clients who was a slip and fall attorney. And you know what? Slip and fall attorneys don't do any business with ERISA compliance attorneys. So, and I think the next thing he wanted to do was have me share offices with a TPA or rent out space. And I'm like, Ron, I don't have any money. I can't pay for it. It's just, it was just really annoying. He was more interested in getting clients from me than bringing me clients and bringing me relationships and whatever. And I think the breaking point was, again, he wanted me to share space with a certain TPA, rent out space from his TPA, which I didn't have the money for, and I didn't need an office. I just think that was very, very self-serving on his part. But more importantly, he said to me, business isn't going good. Maybe you should take some time off, which, when you got a mortgage to pay and, you got family who, maybe didn't have the full confidence in the world that you would succeed on your own, that wasn't the best advice. And I let him go. That was just the only right way. And so I was very, very down, and then I met Mike and Ryan Alfred from Brightscope. They invited me down to meet them at Battery Park. They were at a conference and, just wanted to talk to me, and pull me aside. And I described how, things were going very well. And it was Mike who said, well, you know what, do what we did. We went on LinkedIn groups, we wrote, content, and that's how we built up the reputation of Brightscope. So that gave me an idea. I actually did hire a social media guru, and, he was talking about producing content and, content that was like a call to action. And, I decided to purchase software called InDesign, which is the successor to is it PageMaker? No, yeah, it was PageMaker, which was a desktop publishing program that I used at Stony Brook while I was the managing attorney, while I was the managing editor of the Statesman. So anyway, decided to write some content, once a week, write an article, put it up on this new website called JD Supra. They would disseminate it, and, that's how I started out. And a couple months in, I decided to write an article about payroll providers as the TPA, and why I always thought that was a bad idea. When I was first on LinkedIn, I was very, very opinionated. As we say at the 401k National Conference, that 401k National Conference, I said, when J.D. Carlson, the Retireaholics, were there, I said I was the turn of the punch bowl. That, I say things that are not very, very popular. I say things that are kind of right, but unpopular in the sense that, very frank and honest, and a lot of times that's not something that you can have in the business. And I decided to write an article about payroll providers as TPAs, namely ADP and Paychecks. If you ever see the articles, I think for the first 8 or 9 years, I didn't name them by name. didn't want any problems with that, which we'll discuss later. Uh, but really, it was about ADP and paychecks, which was a problem because I didn't name them by names, and so there was actually I won't name them, but there was a TPA out there who was a payroll provider out here in Long Island. They have since sold their payroll provider business, but anyway, the top sales guy over there, lovely guy, and he's such a lovely guy that he was one of the two people that I presented that 401k conference idea to, and he decided to go with it at the first event at City Field. But anyway, when I used to write these articles and not name ADP and paychecks, and they were still in the payroll providing business, anytime I would speak, he would actually walk out. Because usually the speech had to do with this article, and just my 2 cents. I was always invited by a lot of the companies over the years, like Empower. I think one year they sent me out to Colorado to talk about it in front of all their other TPAs, and this guy was there, and he walked out. It was just very, very funny, but I was very, very frank and very, very honest in my opinion that. Again, I don't think that the ADP and paychecks of the world are very, very good at plan administration, and I think that's the most important thing in my mind when it comes to them. So many mutual fund companies that do TPA services, plan day-to-day 401k plan administration. You don't see me write articles about Fidelity and Vanguard being crappy, or American Funds or T. Rowe Prize. You've never seen me write these articles because the fact is, I haven't seen it where they're consistently bad. I've seen any provider. I've seen, some stuff usually good, and occasionally bad stuff. But, you won't see me write an article, again, about Fidelity, about Vanguard, about any of the mutual fund companies because I haven't seen a consistent, terrible part in administering plans. And so that's why I write articles about payroll providers as TPAs and why I think it's a bad idea. And it's a consistent view. I've changed my mind over the last 10 years. If you read my stuff 10 years ago, you would know that, I had worked for a producing TPA. And in the days before fee disclosure, I felt that their situation and most producing TPAs was problematic because I felt like without fee disclosure, we didn't know whether the producing TPAs were putting clients in certain funds because of revenue sharing or because they were really the best ones. And I just thought there was a conflict of interest. It was an inherent conflict of interest that you would have an RIA picking the funds that would put out the best, revenue sharing to help them with pricing. And since plan sponsors didn't know because that was pre-fee disclosure, I just thought that the whole operation was just, weighed down by conflicts of interest. I was very, very opinionated about it. I probably hurt my business that way by being very, very honest because there's certain companies out there and certain people over the years that, don't like me because I was honest, or stated my opinion, 10 years ago. But, I've changed my tune on producing TPAs because of one big thing. That's fee disclosure. With fee disclosure, it made it more competitive, ball game. Producing TPAs couldn't hide the fact that they were collecting revenue sharing anymore. It really, gave plan sponsors idea of what the real pricing was, and so I don't think you have that conflict of interest, especially because revenue sharing has gone out the way of, bell bottoms and Betamax. So, I still have that consistent view that, ADP and paychecks aren't very good at administration. I just think that they make too many mistakes. I think that they don't give plan sponsors the hand holding that they really, really need on the small and medium-sized market. They sell TPA services the way they sell payroll. They're consistently saying that, this is just a natural progression of payroll and TPA services are, integrated and, they have this interface. There's a, 180 or 360 integration, which I still to this day don't know what it means. but they keep on selling that idea. Oh, we have full integration between TPA and payroll, blah blah blah, which it sounds great. It sounds really important. But if ADP and Paychex really believes that it's really important, why do they offer integration with Empower, with some of the other bigger providers? I'm sure they do it with LinkedIn and Transamerica and Fidelity and all that stuff. Again, if integration was such a big deal, they wouldn't offer it to the competition. Just my 2 cents. And again, like I said, I don't think that payroll. Yeah, I mean payroll. It's payroll information is very very important, but that's not reason enough to hire your payroll provider as your TPA. And again, I don't have a problem with the idea of it as long as there's good, competent plan administration. And consistently, as an ERISA attorney, a good chunk of the plans that have inherent, I mean, serious defects are from payroll providers. I had one client, it was very, very profitable for me, but, they had a payroll provider TPA that, didn't do the ADP and ACP information correctly, and it was a law firm client, and they owed $70,000 in corrective contributions over a 4 to 5 year period. Actually, it was a 3 year period. There were some situations with 5500s that were late as well, and this employer had to take out a loan to pay for the corrective contributions, and that's a problem. That's a problem with a plan sponsor that, voila, they all of a sudden they have a huge problem and have to come up with these contributions. And, from experience, ADP and Paychex have never been proactive. I always talk about a client that when I was at Geller Group, where the plan sponsor, back in the days when the 402G limit was $12,000. I remember it was the owner of a company. She had to return $10,500. I always remember this client very, very well for 2 reasons. Number one, they were kind of like in the Happy Meal business. They would design toys not for McDonald's, but for some of the other chains like Subway and Wendy's and all that stuff. So it was kind of nice. So for my niece and nephew, but this is before I had kids, I'd bring them all these little toys from this client. And then the second reason I remember this client very, very well is because I was at a fiduciary review meeting, and the owner's dog took a crap on the fancy rug at the meeting. So I always remember this client very well. So anyway, they were using one of the payroll providers. She consistently had to receive a $10,500 refund off her deferrals. And when I was looking through the valuation report, I noticed that they only, in order to avoid refunds, she only had to pay a $7,500 QNEC. So listen, if you're a owner of a company and you're given the choice of a $10,500 taxable refund of your SAL deferrals, or you can make a QNEC and salvage that, I think you'll make the QNEC contribution. Just my 2 cents. So anyway, the payroll provider never discussed the idea of a safe harbor plan design, and that was a huge problem, and that's why again they were a client with me for many years to come. So being a TPA is, in my opinion, the most important thing is providing competent administration. And again, I have seen more errors with these payroll providers than any other TPAs. And they get very little support. They give very, very little support to the plan sponsor. They assume that the plan sponsor knows a lot more information. There's no help in completing the annual census and annual questionnaire. The data request form. If you don't tell a plan sponsor exactly what a key employee is, they'll get that wrong, and that's going to be huge consequences for top heavy. And there's no, I'm a big fan of one person to talk to in terms of day-to-day plan administration. And from my experience, only the largest clients get that kind of help, that one-to-one help. A lot of times you will call these payroll providers and there's nobody to talk to. You have this team approach, so whoever you talk to one day may not be the person you talk to the next day about your plan. And that's a problem. I think the plan sponsors need to have that one person that they can rely on over there at the TPA. Most TPAs offer it, and payroll provider TPAs I find don't offer it, only for their largest clients. They're also not big fans. They're not big expertise in plan design, and plan design to me is one of the really important fundamental parts of being a TPA, because plan design allows plan sponsors to maximize their contributions to their highly compensated employees, which in turn decreases tax exposure of not only the employer but also the highly compensated employees as well. If the plan sponsor is an S corporation, LLP, LLC, partnership, and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of flow through treatment organization. So, and of course, another thing that, really bothers me over time, I had a client many, many years ago that's since merged out. They got bought out by another company. They're in the medical technology field, and kind of annoyed me that they were using one of the payroll providers for their 401k plan. It was a $10 million plan. Plan didn't have a financial advisor on the plan. So this payroll provider would bring out their financial expert. But the financial expert who helped them pick funds, kept on insisting, I am not a fiduciary. I think your plan should add a, small cap fund. But I can't tell you to do that because I'm not giving you financial advice. There's so many um, payroll providers, payroll provider TPA clients that don't have a financial advisor on their plan, and so that brings up an interesting dilemma that I see. Is that one of the reasons ADP and Paychecks that I found over the years that they generate a lot of business is they refer business to advisors, of clients that don't have an advisor in their plan, and that's a good way for them to generate some goodwill with advisors, and a good way to get clients. And of course, the other problem that I have is that they, in my opinion, they have a very, very high churn rate. And a churn rate to me is obviously the rate as which they bring on clients and then lose them, meaning that I don't think that they have clients for that very long. The two of them tend to be the largest TPAs in terms of number of plans that they administer, but in terms of number of assets, they're lower down the list because they take on smaller and smaller plans. From experience, they're very good at plans that only offer a safe harbor plan design, because that means there's no ADP, ACP, top-heavy testing. So it's easier for them to work on because there's less problems that may arise. And again, that's always been my position. It's a high turnover rate. Anytime I go write an article and the new one is out, just posted, and the ones who criticize it usually are people that work for these payroll provider TPAs, and that's fine. My opinion is my opinion, and it's not gospel, which I keep on telling people. That's your opinion. That's my opinion. My opinion is, those two aren't very good. You work for those guys. Your opinion is they're fantastic. But you know what? Someone signs my paycheck. They may be fantastic too. I don't know. They don't sign my paycheck. I'm glad they don't sign my paycheck. But heck, everybody's got to eat. I get that. But it's just my opinion. And some of my favorite things over the years is there was one year in particular, and I won't say which one of the two payroll provider TPAs, but there's one year I wrote an article and it talked about a court case and how they insisted that they weren't a fiduciary because they weren't. And I did get a letter from their legal department saying I should withdraw the article, cease and desist. We'll sue you, this, and that. Which it's ridiculous. I used to get those letters I wouldn't say I got those letters all the time, but I will never forget, in law school, I was the executive editor of the news magazine, the American Jurist, and I wrote a really good article about one of the law journals and how inexplicably the timesheets that these editors needed to fill out for school credit were like, incomplete. So the editor in chief of um, the International Law Journal um, sent me a letter from the attorney that she was working for, threatening to sue me, and he was an international law attorney, and I'm like, international law attorneys aren't very very good in libel. So I kind of ignored it, and then the attorney reached out to me and said, "Did you hire an attorney?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." I named the attorney that I had worked for, Elliot Zaffer, may rest in peace, and that was the end of the case. So I've had the experience with that, attorney letter. You said something defamatory, you cease and desist, otherwise we're going to sue you, blah 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 blah. Libel is pretty hard to prove. My opinion is my opinion. My opinion is protected by the First Amendment. Um, and that's it. But again, that went nowhere. But the other crazy story with these articles, the two other crazy. One, I used to get. I think I used to get like. It hasn't happened for a while. I used to get like a mocking email from one guy who worked for one of the companies because I had typos in an article. So I had some trolls. One person one time left a voicemail message with a fake phone number to reach out and contact them. So you get that kind of weird stuff, but not so in so many years. And another crazy story. These articles are disseminated. The reason I wrote these articles is obviously for TPAs and financial advisors to disseminate these articles to current clients and potential clients. JD Carlson, when he was at my LA event at Dodger Stadium, he was one of those sponsors, and he presented to people in the audience that he was first introduced to me by these TPA articles, these 401k TPA payroll provider TPA articles, and how it's helped him save clients from doom, but as well get new clients as well. And a good friend of mine, Lisa Ann, who's on Sirius XM doing the fantasy radio, she was in the audience, and let's just say she was really impressed that 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 people are that I've helped people out with my articles. And we brought it up again when the Retireaholic were there at the 401k National Conference, and again, it's out there. It's cost me business. It's helped my business, but it's helped my stature. It put me on the map, that article, so I'm grateful for it. Well, I mean, I wrote it, so it's not like the article is actually an animate object and had something to do with my success, but those articles really did. And then my final story dealing with that article was, so these TPAs and advisors would give out these potential clients these articles, and I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I had one reach out to me who was so offended by the article because the funny thing about plan sponsors is, most of the time you tell them they're doing something wrong, they'll listen to you. But there are some times where somebody is such a narcissist, or they refuse to believe that they made a bad choice. So this plan sponsor kept on emailing me and putting phone calls that he wanted to talk to me and debate my article and how my article doesn't fit his situation. And I ignored the guy because I don't have time for debates. Obviously, he thinks that he's getting the greatest service in day-to-day plan administration from one of the payroll providers, which I don't even know which one was doing it. If he feels that that's the way he wants to go, that's great. I have no time. Why am I going to debate him? Why would I debate him? I mean, there's this. It's like there's this really lousy Mexican restaurant in the next village over in Island Park. I don't even want to say the name because there's going to be somebody from my area who's going to say, "You said so such and such canteen is a bad place." Well, the food is awful. I mean, the food is terrible. Yet people love the place. I don't know why. Maybe I mean the margaritas are very very good, but the food is just awful. Um, a friend of my wife's, the son had his bar mitzvah party there, and it wasn't that bad because they give you like these little hors d'oeuvres. But I've gone to dinner there a couple times. My God, the food is awful. Uh, the margaritas are good, but again, if you believe that that is good Mexican food, okay, that's fine. That's great. I just don't think so. I have a good friend of mine, Nick, and he's the expert in Mexican food, and he will say that that is like the worst Mexican food he'll eat. I mean, the guy lives like half the year in Nevada, so he's near the California border. You know, he knows some good Mexican food, and he will say that that place in Island Park is really, really awful. But I'm not going to debate people about that. That's your opinion, I'm not going to change your opinion. Uh, I think that Patrick Ewing was not one of the greatest players of all time because he just never was able to put the New York Knicks over the hump. And debating Patrick Ewing fans is futile. So I hope you enjoyed this little discussion about the Payroll Provider TPA articles. As you know, they're an annual event, sometimes in June, sometimes in July, sometimes now in late May. But we hope I hope you enjoy them. They've been a great, great marketing from my firm. Of course, I don't get any business from the Payroll Provider TPAs, but this is the price to pay for being the turd in the punch bowl. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and hope you come back next week. Thank you. Take care. Bye.